The world bankers are the ones that have destroyed the rainforest down in Brazil. If you look at the history of the World Bank under Robert S. McNamara, he's the one that designed the Vietnam War. He left the Vietnam War in 1967 and went over to World Bankdom, where he became the president. He set up massive loans that were given without the permission of the American people. There was a token rubber stamp for these massive loans to go out of our world banking system into the hands of Brazil and Mexico and the Latin America countries, and we don't know really how those monies were spent. One project that the monies were spent on in Brazil was a large highway connecting the inner parts of Brazil with the coast, and that highway still does not function properly, from what I understand, because it was designed poorly and it floods when the rains come, and so it's not dependable. Billions of money were spent on that. Billions were spent on dams that don't work. Generating areas of the world were decimated by the very people that were saying that they wanted to save our ecology, save our biospheres, and keep the world safe for mankind.
When you were invited to be a host, did you receive advance information about who the dignitaries were that would be present?
No. I had no idea that those dignitaries were going to be there. All I knew was there were going to be people representing the interests of reindeer and the Arctic, where I wanted to get my son a job. When I got there, the first night, I was invited to the opening party that they had, and I noticed one of the name tags waiting for someone to pick it up was Eddie Rothschild. And I said, Rothschild? I wonder if the Rothschilds are here. And then that's when I checked the materials that were given to me, the registration packet, which contained booklets like this. This is our common future, by the way, according to the world elite. The people that are going to control the one world religion coming out of this, the one world banking system, the one world government, also have in mind that our common future is like these poor Ethiopians who have been turned against by their very own government. So they passed out these booklets. These are the lands that we're going to be losing to this bank. I'll get into that now. But there were about 1,500 people, and then we went up to Estes Park after 3 days in Denver for 4 days of shirt-sleeve sessions. All right, well, under Robert S. McNamara's leadership in the 1960s, an amassing of today $1.1 trillion in debt and accrued interest that cannot be paid back, most of which cannot be paid back by these poor little third world countries, has accumulated. $400 billion of this, according to David Rockefeller, he says that nearly $400 billion in debt is owed to a number of commercial banks, including his own bank, the Chase Manhattan. And according to the Brazilian with whom I spoke there, who is who confided with me with the Brazilian situation, there is no way that they can pay these back. These loans are uncollectible. Now, most of this money is owed to the United States banking system. We have $150 billion in equity in our banks that can absorb the shock of the first $150 billion that is written off. And after that first $150 billion is written off, Charles, the next $750 billion is going to come out of the depositors' hands in the banks because the bank equity cannot handle those losses. So we have been propelled by the World Bank in our United States economy here that either way we lose. If we do not have a World Conservation Bank established as a result of this Congress that I went to, that will take out this debt and refinance it using the world's wilderness lands as collateral, and we'll get into that. If we do not have this World Conservation Bank, our U.S. economy will collapse. We are at the point of collapse now. The banking authorities that investigate banks are hammering our United States banks right now and saying, you have to write off this debt. This is uncollectible. The loans have gone into non-accrual, and the countries have already admitted that they cannot repay, and you have to write this debt off. They can't write the debt off, or we will go into financial collapse. Either way, you lose. They plan to create a super World Bank that's going to absorb all the debts that the World Bank has created, and then from a basis. Every bank has to have capitalization. Now, it might be the equity that people that start the bank pump into the bank and say, here's $100,000 from me and $100,000 from this guy, and let's then loan it out and get this bank going. Well, the collateral in this bank is going to be the 34% of the Earth's surface, the Earth's land surface. Michael Sweetman, who is designated by Edmund de Rothschild as the World Conservation Bank president. I had lunch with Michael, and I said, Michael, I have analyzed what I've heard in this Congress up to this point, and at this point I cannot see how this bank can survive, because I, as an accountant, always look for an earnings engine in the capital statement, in the capitalization of the bank, something that's going to produce interest, dividends, earnings to keep the bank running and pay the employees and so on, and I don't see it in this bank. I see collateralization coming from worthless wilderness lands, and that's why they're wilderness lands, because nobody can get any economic order out of it. What's going on, Michael? And he said, we're working on that. I said, you don't have an answer as to how this bank is going to survive, and you're going to the IMF World Bank Congress at the end of this month? I had luncheon with Michael Sweetman and Baron and Mrs. Rothschild. I laid out my fears to the table at which I was sitting, and I received confirmation from a World Bank authority, who I cannot say. I cannot say their name, but they confirmed that my suspicions were correct. The United States is going to go down the tubes very shortly. When? Would you put on that tape by John D. Rockefeller IV, February 1st, 1988?
What's going to happen in 1988. But I do know in 1988 that we've got to lay our base for either this year or surely for next year. Because all of those people who are out there running for president are making the largest mistake of their personal and professional lives, because when one of them gets inaugurated in 1989, all of the chickens are coming home to roost. And it is going to be an extraordinary year of reckoning. A reckoning in terms of the budget process, of bold action. It'll be the time for it because it'll be a new administration, and all kinds of old habits are going to have to go out the window if we are to survive as a nation. And I believe it's that serious, and you know it.
We have the only dollar that's worth anything, is what Rothschild is going to tell the United States economists. Our world conservation dollar is the only dollar that's worth anything, because it's the only one that's capitalized and that has value behind it. But you know, as of this meeting, that there's no value in wilderness lands. And you also know at this meeting that there is no earnings engine in the World Conservation Bank. In other words, it is a fraudulent bank. Remember when Esau said to Jacob, I'm really hungry and I want some of that pottage that you have there. And Jacob said, will you give me your birthright for it? And that was the first known swap. That was a counter-trade transaction. And through counter-trade, Rothschild and his bevy of bankers are going to debt swap and counter-trade the United States, every one of us, every city, every town, every state, every bit of wealth is going to be counter-traded out of the country into the Royal Bank of Canada, which is the collection basin for the American swapping activities. They're going to come along and say, you can't pay your mortgage and you're down on your knees and you're going to lose your farm. Here, take a World Conservation Bank loan. 5 years before the first payment, and the payments are low and it's only 3% interest, and you'll be helping Mother Earth. And that's another aspect of this thing. It's going to be a religious pride thing. Hitler came along touting the Fatherland. Well, we're going to hear something even bigger than that.
Mr. Rothschild, one of the foremost bankers of the world, appears there, that will save their wealth and power. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yes, the World Conservation Bank is going to be the decoupling mechanism for the wealthy to disengage themselves from capitalism and go to the back of the bank, so to speak, and become the creditors of the bank and then wind up as the world's dictators.